Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher. Recently, I visited Ashdod, the port city south of Tel Aviv and just north of Gaza, on the shores of the eastern Mediterranean. This ancient biblical city is today a vibrant modern city and home to 250,000 Jewish people, many of whom have come from all over the world to live in Israel. I was there to meet Israel Pochtar, pastor of a congregation called Beit Hallel, a congregation he started with just a handful of people. Gradually, despite prolonged and severe persecution from some in the religious community, this congregation has thrived and grown, and now 200 adults and 100 children meet each week. In this final programme with Israel Pochtar, I asked him to describe the bigger picture of what God is doing in Israel and the wider Middle East.
Well, first of all, I can tell you Israel is really changes. We see lots of good changes, speaking about kingdom changes. Yes, society of Israel growing, population is growing, the economy is strong, but challenge is also growing. So it's not easy nation. It's blessed, definitely blessed nation, but not easy nation to live at. But most exciting thing for me as a pastor, as a spiritual person, it's actually to see what God is doing. And God is really on the move. And again, I probably cannot say revival has come yet. But all the changes are just enormous. We see lots of changes with the young people. They're really searching for answers, and they see they get tired of the conflict and the Palestinians, the Israelis. What's going to be future? And we all come into a conclusion. But there are probably very few, if any, political ways to resolve the conflict. People tried. Many people tried, and nothing works. But we know the promises of God, and He promised that Isaiah 19, when our neighbors, all the Arab nations and the Jewish people will worship together God of Israel in Jerusalem. So it's given us a reason to believe for major revival in all Middle East, in Israel with Palestinians, in Israel with Israeli Arabs, and of course Israeli with Jewish people. So Bible, now we're coming really to the points when we see Bible is only the way, Jesus is only the way, Bible is only the hope, biblical prophecy is only a hope. So I would ask my all the English friends and people who care for Israel and pray for Israel, keep praying, because for many decades we didn't see much changes, but now it's happening. So now it's actually time to pray even more, because changes are coming. And I would say to people who maybe would disagree with theologically, does Israel really matters, and what really God is, all the scripture about Israel, is it really about physical Israel, not only spiritual, and etc. I have a wonderful testimony. There is one very traditional institute in America that actually never been involved with Israel. They theologically, they doesn't think of Israel as any special country. But when somebody submit to them statistics, what happening in Israel, and when they put numbers into their data, into their system, and actually they found that in Israel, the growth we face in the last 20 years, by numbers, again, not by numbers, but statistical numbers, okay? Not just millions, but statistical numbers. A population compared to how many, a number of Christians have to used to be, a number of Christians that we have now, and they said actually that's probably one of the fastest growing Christian faith in the earth. Can you imagine it? Of course, when we're speaking about China, there is billions of people, and there's big growth. But statistically speaking, actually it's got their attention. Really. So for people who really doesn't care about biblical prophecies, I can just tell you, God is saving people. And everyone would agree with me that everyone needs salvation. The Arabs need salvation, Muslims need salvation, Jewish people need salvation. So please pray for revival, pray for salvation of Israel. And I speak in really generally, because I know people have different opinions. And I want to thank you, all the listeners who've been praying for Israel, who've been standing with Israel. Thank you very much. I have lots of personal testimonies when Holy Spirit would just fill me in even not really appropriate times and situations, and I knew it's prayer of Christians who pray for revival and salvation of Israel. So thank you very much.
It comes back to the question, though, as you say, a lot of people say, well, why should I care? How would you answer that? Why does it matter to God that Jewish people become believers?
Well, it's matter because it's written in the Bible that it's matter. So first of all, it's biblical prophecies. It's not only my feelings or your feelings, and my feelings can change, but what God have promised would never change. And God promised in the Old Testament, but also New Testament, that actually all Israel shall be saved. And I know sometimes people are waiting for some mysterious outpouring of Holy Spirit, but we know mostly God also using people, prayers of people and evangelism of people, the efforts of people. So yes, I do believe we need to care for Israel, not because I'm Jewish and I'm living in Israel, but because it's written in the Bible and God is keeping his word. God calls Israel firstborn son. And if you know biblical culture and biblical traditions, firstborn always is very important. And Israel is firstborn. And God said, because of their unfaithfulness or their unbelief, they fell apart, but they will be grafted back. So it's a promise of God. And gospel was preached in Israel. Group of Jewish people, disciples of Jesus, went to the nations and they changed the nations with the gospel. Now it's a time of nations and Gentiles and different nations to come and bring gospel back to Israel and just join hands to help with the revival in the land.
So what are you expecting to see and hear and witness in the next year, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, we expect to see growth of the favor of God, just change in the society in general, and of course salvations. Now, speaking of salvation, my congregation, like Beit Hallel, I'm a pastor in Beit Hallel congregation, is growing, but it's a slow growth. We do lots of evangelism, big projects, many projects, but the growth is very slow. Now, word have been preached a lot, so we expect to see more results and growing openness and changes, but also changes in the society. Because nowadays, with the media, there's many outreaches and many good efforts done by different young people through Facebooks and through YouTube channels, and they evangelize Israel a lot. So we're hoping and waiting for a change of mindset, change of hearts of people, and of course growth of congregations all over Israel.
So you're describing a situation where people are much bolder than they were 30 years ago. They're very much more willing to talk about their faith as Messianic believers. Can you tell me a little bit about the Arab peoples, the Muslims who are becoming to faith? Are you in touch with people on this score? I know that you work closely with other pastors across the land.
Yes, we do see some movements of God, and there is no easy answers because to explain how difficult it is to work with Muslims in Israel, especially in Israel or in West Bank, it's very, very difficult. So mostly their work is underground work. Now they do preach the gospel, do share the gospel, and they see results, and they see many ethnical Christians, or like officially called Christians, like Orthodox and Catholic Christians, Greek Orthodox Arabs, coming to know Jesus and really join congregations. Less Muslims, but there is movements of God. It's just very difficult to keep track of it, because many times they cannot come openly to the congregations. So it's hard to believe, but really like a couple dozen miles from us, totally different life. When it's come to Arabic community, it's difficult. But all the pastors sharing testimonies, how they're leading other Arabs to the Lord, how they're leading Muslims to the Lord. So God is obviously doing something. It's difficult to measure because of special situation we face and danger behind it. But yes, I always listen to testimonies. And of course, way more testimonies come from Jordan and from Egypt and from neighbor countries. There is lots of good changes for the kingdom in our neighbor countries.
The number of believers in this land is growing. I'm hearing that there are some Israelis who are going abroad as missionaries to other nations. Is this something that is part of your experience here?
Yes, I have a number of young people, Israelis, when they get saved, they just received passion for nations right there. And some of them would never even travel before. They never traveled, they never had passion for, travel. They've been just living caught with their Jewish life, local Israeli life. But getting saved, their eyes open and they receive supernatural love for nations. So I have a number of young people who really believe God calling them to go to the nations, to share their testimony, to encourage churches, believers, and even planning evangelism. Like, for example, one of young man in my church who was saved, he went to preach to Norway, and one of the friends said, well, you're from Israel. I have Syrian neighbors, or Syrian refugee neighbors. Would like to talk to them. So they have lunch together, and these two young guys get saved. Now the testimony goes, they become the most active, most happy evangelists in Norwegian church after receiving Jesus, So it's amazing to see how God is using Israelis more and more to share testimony, to reach out Muslims and other people.
You've been listening to Israel Pochtar sharing his story, and we'll certainly be following the story of what God is doing in Ashdod in the future. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab or Palestinian Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. If you'd like to know more about our work through our bi-monthly newsletter, including news about our upcoming tours, please either visit our website www.olivetreefund.org or write to me, Julia Fisher, OTRF, PO Box 402, Billingshurst, RH14 4BQ in the UK. Meanwhile, join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.